In the United States, prison officials are obligated under the Eighth Amendment to provide prisoners with adequate medical care. This principle applies regardless of whether the medical care is provided by governmental employees or by private medical staff under contract with the government. Inmates have a right to health care under the Eighth Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. It is not a right to the best possible health care, but it is a right to at least that level of health care that a civilized society would think necessary. Tragically, many inmates have long been denied even that minimal level of medical and mental health care, with consequences that have been serious and often fatal. Inmates are forced to wait months or years for medically necessary appointments and examinations, and many receive inadequate medical care in substandard facilities. Serious mentally ill inmates languish in horrific conditions without access to necessary mental health care, raising the acuity of mental illness throughout the system and increasing the risk of inmate suicide. A significant number of inmates have died as a result of the failure to provide constitutionally adequate medical care. Today, the Insider Exclusive Investigative News team goes behind the headlines on location in Minnesota with Mark Kosieradzki at Kosieradzki Smith Law Firm in Justice in America, Wanda Boswell's story, to report on a landmark case which established that an unconvicted person detained in jail is entitled to the same due process protection as an ordinary citizen. 6.5-month pregnant Wanda Boswell was stopped by the Sherburne County Sheriffs for an ordinary driving violation. A record check revealed 2 outstanding warrants in 2 other nearby counties for $150 and $50, a grand total of $200, which Wanda did not have on her at 1 a.m. in the morning, so she was arrested. Wanda had been driving home on a 2-hour trip back to the Mille Lacs Reservation, where she lived with her husband and their 2 children after visiting with her sisters in the Twin Cities. During the booking proceeding at the jail, Wanda informed the jailers that she was 6.5 months pregnant, that she was having difficulties with her pregnancy, and that she was under the care of a physician, and provided their name and number. While in her cell, Wanda started hemorrhaging and immediately informed the jailers, but they made no attempt to contact Boswell's physician or any other trained medical personnel for almost 10 hours. Sherburne County Jail knew they had a problem on their hands because they sent a telex to the local counties that read as follows: she has a warrant for your county of $50 bail. She also has a warrant in Becker County. She has a bail of $150, and she's 6 months pregnant and she's starting to bleed. What would you like done about your bail? We want her out of our facility as soon as possible. Any suggestions? Still, no calls were made for emergency medical help because one county refused to release her for the $150 bail. Wanda lay in her cell, cramped, bleeding, and in great pain. Finally, approximately 10 hours later, she was rushed to the hospital, but started delivering her baby in the ambulance. Her baby boy was born at the hospital and died soon after. In the United States Bill of Rights, under Section 1983 of the Eighth Amendment, the government is required to provide adequate medical treatment for prisons. In this Insider Exclusive Investigative Special, we visit with Mark Kosieradzki, who will discuss how Wanda Boswell got the justice she deserved. We will also get a better understanding to important issues like, what does deliberate indifference to serious medical needs mean? And what kind of adequate health care is covered under the Eighth Amendment? Mark has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and across the nation. He makes it his dedicated mission to get legitimate and truthful answers to what really happened to his clients in each case. He sees it his mission to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. Mark has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. His amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mark to the show. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
You have a rather unusual background. I mean, you are a well-known trial lawyer. You were president of the Minnesota Trial Lawyers Association for a while, weren't you?
I was.
But your background comes from what? Your upbringing? What exactly inspired you to be a trial lawyer for the people?
Well, all of us are a function of our life. That's how we grow up, and what we become in life is started by how we were raised and our life experiences. I'm a scrappy Polish kid, son of Polish immigrants. My father and mother were in the war. My mother was a freedom fighter. She was at 17, she was an insurrectionist in the Polish uprising, living in sewers for the 62-day battle before she was captured and went to concentration camp. My father was captured by the Russians early in the war and was sent to a gulag in Siberia, north of the Arctic Circle.
How long was he there?
Several years.
Really?
And when the Allies were formed, then he was liberated and liberated to Iraq.
To Iraq?
So, and then they went on to school in Italy and immigrated to the United States with nothing but their educations. So from birth, I was taught that what you know and what you learn is important. I was taught about the American dream because I'm the son of the American dream. I taught about how important it is to fight for your principles. My mother stood up to the Nazis. My father stood up to the Russians. I was taught that everybody is the same. As my dad says, it doesn't matter if you're a private or if you're a general, the same. And you treat everyone the same. Mm-hmm. And I was taught that you have to have passion for life, and I was taught that you have to stand up for the people who aren't as strong as you, and you have to be a voice for them. So growing up as a son of immigrants in a conservative little town in Iowa, where people didn't always have an open mind, I learned to stand up for myself, for my family, and for other people. And I was taught that I had to have an education. And I ended up as a trial lawyer representing those who can't speak for themselves. Yeah. And I learned to stand up to the major corporations of America and even the world. And I live the life of David versus Goliath every day.
Right, so you were destined to do this, weren't you?
I was genetically bred to be a scrappy street fighter.
Today we are here talking about a case that you successfully resolved where everyone needs to be treated equally, and it's a landmark case. Tell our audience a little bit about this case, please.
Boswell versus Sherburne County was a life-changing event for me. Wanda Boswell was a Native American woman. She came to visit her sister in Minneapolis and was driving home, and about 1 a.m. she got picked up for a traffic violation. There was a $200 warrant out for her for collecting rice, wild rice, without a license. And because of that heinous crime, and the fact that she was poor and didn't have $200, they threw her in jail. They said, we're not going to let you out unless you can come up with the money. And she's pregnant.
6 months.
She was 27 weeks pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so they throw her in jail, and she says, I'm pregnant, and I'm having problems. And she starts cramping, and she starts bleeding, and she starts delivering the baby. And they don't give her any medication. They won't call her doctor, and they say, you don't get out unless you can come up with the money. And she doesn't have the money, and she's delivering a baby. And it keeps going, and it keeps getting worse. And for 9 hours, she's delivering a baby, and she's getting blood clots, and she's holding them up to the camera in the jail and pounding on the door, screaming for help. But what do? They don't call a doctor. They don't let her out. And ultimately, they killed the baby. And that pissed me off. And so I brought a civil rights action for cruel and unusual punishment and violation of equal protection. And we litigated it. And I think we made a difference.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was kind of the smoking gun in this case? Because, you know, this could be a he said, she said case, except for...
Well, I'm obsessed with documents. I'm obsessed with electronic records. And when they first started, they denied that they even knew she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And what we found was a telex buried in an electronic machine. It was kind of a precursor to email. And the telex was the jailer sending this electronic mail to another jail saying, we've got this woman in our jail, and she's pregnant, and she's starting to bleed, but you've got a warrant out for her arrest. What do you want to do? And the response was, if she's got the money, take it. But if not, get rid of her, because we don't want to pay their medical bills either. And that was the smoking gun that proved that they knew she was pregnant. It proved the time they knew she was pregnant. It proved that she was bleeding, and it proved the motive, that they didn't want to pay for medical bills.
How was this case resolved?
Well, this case was litigated fiercely. It was tried for 6 weeks to a courageous judge and jury. But before we got there, the government said, we don't have a responsibility for this patient because she's not a prisoner. Therefore, we don't have to look at cruel and unusual punishment. And they used the word detainee. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
This was the first case in the history of America where the courts said someone who's arrested but not even charged yet is a detainee, but they're entitled to the same constitutional rights as every other American. And we went all the way to the 8th Circuit. The Supreme Court rejected it, and then we tried it for 6 weeks and got a major verdict.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as if the other side was looking to create a separate class of people that were neither citizens nor inmates, something in between, and that separate category was not entitled to the same rights and benefits that everyone else is entitled to.
That's exactly what they were saying.
Yeah.
They're saying...
I mean, it's amazing that even put that argument forth.
This drives me crazy. If I want that kind of stuff, I'll move to Afghanistan or Iraq. But in the United States, we have a democracy, and we have a constitution. But the problem is, a lot of times government officials don't think the Constitution applies to them. And we see it. We've seen it on the news just in this last week. And it takes people as courageous as Wanda Boswell to stand up for them and be willing to come to firms like mine, where we're going to say, we're going to go to war with you folks, because we're going to hold the government accountable. We're going to make the government follow the law just like everyone else, and we have rights. We have a democracy. This isn't Libya. It's not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. It's America.
It is America.
What was the outcome?
The jury listened intently for 6 weeks and then awarded the largest verdict ever at that time for the death of a newborn in a violation of constitutional rights. And the most powerful part of that whole trial for me was, after the jury rendered the verdict, the court took him out the back door and down a private elevator, and as we left the courthouse, they were waiting out on the street for my client, and ran up to her and hugged her and apologized to her for what the government did to her.
Outstanding. This brings up another issue about what rights does everybody, including specifically people that have been detained, that are awaiting trial, people that are incarcerated after sentencing, what rights can they expect when it comes to medical care?
Well, number one, they have the rights of a basic human being. Government organizations, be it VA hospitals or jails or government clinics have a responsibility to give appropriate and reasonable care. If the government acts in a way where they are violating your rights constitutionally, saying we're going to treat you different than other people, or that we are going to lock you up and not give you any care, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Mm-hmm. And our government has what is known as a 1983 action. It's civil rights. You can't violate someone's civil rights.
Yeah, whenever we produce a show like this and it's broadcast on TV, we get tons of calls, emails, from people claiming that their rights have been violated while their loved ones were locked up in jails and prisons, okay? You must get the same thing, and you will get the same thing. I can guarantee you that after this is broadcast. So, my question is, how do you choose which cases to handle and represent, and how does the client, your estimation of your evaluation of the client figure in that?
Well, we have to first learn, has this person been wronged?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes bad things happen to people.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do things that they asked for.
Yeah.
But many times people make a mistake in their life, and then the government abuses them and takes away their rights. So we have to have a serious violation, first of all.
Yes.
If someone doesn't get treatment for a hangnail, can't do that.
Yeah.
If someone gets convicted and they don't like it, can't do that. But if there's a serious violation of a right, it's similar to the reporters being arrested in Ferguson this week. That's a right taken away. And that's something we look at. A serious violation of right, and then we have to see, can we prove it? And do we have leads of where we can prove it?
In this case, when you initially went into the case, you didn't know anything about the telex. That came out later.
Right.
So you hopefully are looking to find something that can prove your case, correct?
Well, I'm obsessed with records, and a big part of my practice is helping lawyers all over America get records that are being hidden from them by corporations and by the government.
And how do you do that? How do you do that better than other people, let's say?
I've developed a technique of merging a number of rules where the government or the corporation has to provide a person to talk about what kind of documents exist, not being filtered through their lawyers. They've got to bring in a person who will testify under oath. What documents exist? How and why are they created? What is the policy for destruction? Where are they stored? Electronically, in paper. How do you communicate with each other?
Yeah.
And now, how did you search for it? And now, prove to me that these are complete. And what happens is...
How does one do that?
Well,
if I say here are 10 documents, these are all the documents that I have, and you say to me, prove to me that these are complete, how does one prove them?
Well, because when a lawyer gives them to me, I'm going to say, okay, I'll accept that you're telling me the truth, but how do I know your client's telling me the truth? Mm-hmm. So I get a witness in the room, under oath, with a camera, just like that one, pointed at him, and a stenographer off to their side. And then we have a series of questions that we ask to force them to tell us where the sources of information are. And once we find the sources of information, now we start subpoenaing the computers and the telephones and the file server, and we start finding the tracks there, the electronic tracks that they can't cover up, and when they try to cover up, the cover-up appears.
Yeah, but oftentimes companies don't gladly turn this stuff over, do they?
They never turn it over.
Okay, so what do you do then?
That's when we subpoena them.
Okay, and then when they refuse to do it, then what?
Then I say, I'm going to be at the office with the stenographer waiting. And if you're not there, you're doing it at your own peril. Because they don't have a right to say, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
This, again, is a democracy. We have rules. We have a court system.
Yeah.
And the court system will force them to come if they choose.
Yes.
The problem is with a lot of lawyers is they're not willing to put in the effort to do the fight. They're not willing to stand up to these big entities, big governments or organizations. Yeah. And we do. That's what I was bred. Yeah. My mother stood up to the Nazis. I can stand up to major international corporations.
In other words, no matter what it takes or how long it takes, you're going to get the truth.
That's what we do.
Well, you certainly got it in this case. How long did it take for them to give up that telex, by the way?
2 years.
2 years, huh? Because they knew the damage it could do. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on this show. It was a wonderful case, and you fought for the rights of another voiceless person, and we wish you continued success, and thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.